Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show. I wanted to talk a little bit about Mark Few and his Gonzaga Bulldogs. And the Bulldogs are a team that so far this season we have spoken a lot about on this show. And I feel like it's all warranted because historically, we all know Gonzaga has been the team that's known as the little engine that could. They were a mid-major program that over the last 20 years, under the direction of Mark Few, this is a program that has really turned into a legitimate powerhouse, and I totally understand. They haven't won a national championship yet. But at the same time, what Mark Few has been able to do with this program has been remarkable, and the more and more you watch Gonzaga, all of a sudden, they're becoming one of the premier destinations in the country to play college basketball. And that is really a lot of credit to Mark Few and the job that he's been able to do. And what made Saturday's game against Iowa so impressive was not only the fact that Gonzaga was able to win by a final score of 99-88, it was how exactly they got it done, especially when you consider the circumstances. Because if you remember, a couple weeks ago, Gonzaga was actually supposed to play Baylor, a team that most people have ranked number 2 in the country. And in that game against Baylor, it was supposed to be the game that everyone was looking forward to. It was supposed to be the game of the season, 1 versus 2, and ultimately it didn't happen. But at the same time, luckily for college basketball fans, Mark Few has the attitude, and this is another reason why I just love this Gonzaga team so much, is that Mark Few has the attitude of that, I'm down to play anyone at any time. And Iowa was just like, all right, we'll play you. And Iowa is a team that this season has a lot of hype. They are one of the best offensive teams in the country. We all saw what they were able to do against North Carolina. And offensively in this game, it's not like Iowa disappointed. Luka Garza literally did everything he could to somehow, some way give the Hawkeyes a legitimate chance to win this game. He finished with 30 points. 13 of 18 from the field in 37 minutes. You also have Joe Wieskamp, a guy that last year I thought was a little disappointing for Iowa opposed to what he was able to do his freshman year. But at the same time, he's been really good and really productive to start off this season for the Hawkeyes. He gave the Hawks 20 on 8 of 16 from the field, but Jordan Bohannon, he really struggled. I think in this game, his shot selection just killed the Hawkeyes as he went 1 for 8 from the field and 0 of 5 from 3. You also look at CJ Frederick. He only had 8 points, only hit 1 3, and Iowa has been getting good bench production, and I think that continued in this game from Nunji and Toussaint. Both of those guys gave Iowa solid efforts. So it's not like when you watch the game, Iowa sucked. It's not like Gonzaga won the game and they didn't deserve to win. The thing that made this game so interesting for me was 2 things. Number 1, we've seen many times throughout this college basketball season that teams that are coming back from a COVID break could be a little rusty, and it's natural. It's what you've expected. Teams like Tennessee, who no one really knows just how good they are yet, they came out a little rusty in their first couple games because their season was on pause right at the start, and they haven't had as much reps as everyone else. And Gonzaga, when you look at them, they don't use it as an excuse whatsoever. They just came out on Saturday against Iowa, and the scary thing is, even though we all expected them to look a little rusty coming off of the COVID break, especially against an Iowa team, and let's face it, after Gonzaga won this game, the conversations are going to start coming up of, oh, can this Gonzaga team actually go undefeated and enter the NCAA tournament with a bagel in terms of the loss column? And after this win against Iowa, that is looking more likely and likely. And we all know just how hard it is for a team in college basketball to go undefeated, especially entering the NCAA tournament. But when you look at the WCC, it's a good league. It's a solid league. I think it's a league that from 2 to 5 over the last couple of years has really improved. But here's the problem with that. As much as those teams have improved, Gonzaga has gotten even better in that stretch as well. They are right now playing like an absolute powerhouse. And Gonzaga has a game coming up against Virginia that probably means that the game against Baylor never ends up happening, which is obviously super unfortunate because I do believe right now those two teams are the best two in college basketball. It isn't even that close, and I do think if anyone could beat Gonzaga, Baylor would have a really good chance to do it. But at the same time, right now, there's a very good chance that that game does not end up happening. And looking at the remainder of Gonzaga's schedule, that game against Virginia the day after Christmas on the 26th at 4 p.m. could be their best chance to lose. And if they win that game, I think the conversations are really going to start approaching of Gonzaga being the number one overall seed not only, but also entering the NCAA tournament undefeated. And I've already spoken about during this segment a lot about how impressive Gonzaga was coming off of the COVID break. But the other impressive thing for me was the fact that they won this game. Not only that, but it was the way they won this game. We all talk about Jalen Suggs and how good of a player he is, and I think right now he has a legitimate argument right now to be considered the best player in college basketball. We all know how great of a season Luka Garza has had. We all know that Cade Cunningham of Oklahoma State is phenomenal, but Jalen Suggs, the more and more you watch him play, given his attitude and his toughness, and more importantly his skill, it is just crazy how good this player is. And in a sport in college basketball where, let's face facts, there have been so many freshmen, whether it's this year or past years, that when they first get to campus, they just look overwhelmed and they disappoint given the expectations. And I'm not saying that's anyone's fault. It happens. These guys are 18 years old. It is very hard to transition from the high school game to the college game. But you watch Jalen Suggs play, he's unfazed. And on Saturday against Iowa, in 33 minutes, he goes 8 of 17 from the field, 7 of 10 from 3. Jalen Suggs only made one field goal that wasn't a 3. Going into this game, he was 2 of 7 on the season from 3. So when you look at Gonzaga, they're showing you that not only do they just have a plethora of weapons that they could throw at you that could produce offensively, but Jalen Suggs showed you part of his game that I don't think anyone necessarily expected for Gonzaga to show, especially against a really good team like Iowa. How about Joel Ayayi? He's a guy that a lot of people, including myself, expected to be a breakout player for this Gonzaga team this year. And I'm not saying he's been bad, but at the same time, even though his numbers off the chart may not say anything direct to you, on Saturday against Iowa, he had 38 minutes, 5 of 10 from the field, 0 of 1 from 3, and 11 points. Those numbers aren't necessarily going to jump out at you, but I feel like in college basketball, a lot of times that is what makes a championship team championship material. It's having that guy whose numbers don't necessarily jump off the page at you, but if you actually watch the games, you could see just how big of an impact he's able to make. And for me, when you look at Gonzaga, that is what Joel Ayayi is. And when you look at the Zags, the job that he's been able to do, doing the little things that not necessarily everyone else would notice or wants to do, is phenomenal. He knows how to use the slipperiness to be effective, crashing the glass from the perimeter, and he is Gonzaga's leading rebounder. This guy is averaging 10.3 rebounds per game, and when you look at college basketball, that is very rare, obviously, for a backcourt player to have. And this guy's vision is insane. His combo guard skills of being a great shooter and a great passer is really good. And I feel like if you just look at the box score, once again, you won't necessarily know just how big of an impact Joel Ayayi will make. Also, I think Drew Timme did a really nice job, at least doing his best to limit Luka Garza and Iowa in this game. Obviously, Luka got his in 30 points. I think his footwork was off the charts here. That's kind of a lost art in today's modern day age of college basketball. But yeah, I was really impressed with what the Gonzaga Bulldogs were able to do. And when you look at their schedule, on opening night, they beat Kansas by 12. They are able to put up 102 points against the Jayhawks. They also beat Auburn, who isn't necessarily that good, but that's still a Power 5 team. And not only did Gonzaga beat them, but they ran Auburn out of the gym. And then they beat West Virginia in a very close game. And that West Virginia game also was able to show me something about Gonzaga. It showed me that in a game where not necessarily everything could go their way, and if you remember that game, that was when Jalen Suggs, it looked like for a second his Achilles might have just been done, and there was a slight chance that we thought he could be out for the season and maybe his career could go down a totally different road. Luckily, he's healthy, thank God, but if you remember, in that game, it could have been really, really bad for Gonzaga. If you lose him, the total outlook of their season looks totally different. And Andrew Nebhart, the transfer from Florida, comes right off the bench and really saves Gonzaga's bacon. Gonzaga looked flustered. If you remember, West Virginia's bigs were just really frustrating them. Their offense couldn't necessarily get going at all. And still, somehow, some way, behind the great play of Andrew Nebhart, Gonzaga was able to pull away and get the job done. And that showed me a lot. When you're a championship caliber team, you have to show me that you could face some adversity and still get over it, even on not your best night. And that is exactly what Gonzaga was able to do against West Virginia. And then against Iowa, when everyone expected them to come out rusty, they were the opposite of that. And right now, if you're seeding the NCAA tournament, Gonzaga looks like the number one overall seed right now, and it's not that close. And I think that's another credit to Mark Few, is that when he looks at Gonzaga, he knows just how good this program could be. He knows that deep down, this program is a top 5 program in college basketball. But what he also knows, what makes him so great, is that the committee won't recognize Gonzaga as that unless they pull off some great non-conference wins. We see in college football recently all the time that the outside group of 5 mid-major squads aren't necessarily treated the same way as your Alabamas or as your Clemsons. And I feel like Gonzaga only a couple years ago was on that same boat, but Mark Few said, okay, I know just how good this program is. We just have to show the committee, and Gonzaga has done an excellent job just scheduling ridiculously tough games outside of their conference. And once again, it's not like the WCC is a bad conference. BYU, St. Mary's, San Francisco, Pacific, Pepperdine, those are all teams that are improving, but at the same time, they're just not on the same level as Gonzaga right now, and I would be surprised if Gonzaga loses more than one WCC game. Obviously, going to BYU will be tough. Going to St. Mary's will be tough, but historically, Gonzaga has played pretty well in both of those two venues, and it's going to be very interesting to see if the Zags could enter the tournament undefeated, because right now, this team is just playing at an elite level. Corey Kispert wasn't even particularly that good against Iowa, and still, Gonzaga was able to get the job done, and it was a phenomenal win. Mark Few and his squad deserve a lot of credit, and we'll see what they'll look like going forward. Because Gonzaga is the cream of the crop in college basketball.